Hey everybody, welcome back to another Tuesday's Tech Talk. There's a couple of things I want to share with you guys before we really get into this week's episode. One, thank you everyone for tuning in and watching all these videos. The view count has really skyrocketed, and Ron at New Record Day, who does the editing of all these videos for us and puts them up on his page, benefits from the fact that all you guys are tuning in. The folks at YouTube throw in little commercials now because the counts are getting high, and you'll possibly see a little commercial sometime during the video, and if you do, just let it play. I know the tendency is to want to just reach up there and click skip, but if you let it play for however many seconds commercial is, then Ron receives some monetary reimbursement from YouTube for every time those commercials run, and it helps cover the cost of everything involved in doing this. And plus, the guy just had twins, so help him out a little bit there, folks. And the second thing I want to talk to you about is the up and coming videos that I have planned. I want to kind of give you a heads up on some things that I want to do. I want to walk you guys through the build process of a pair of speakers from design to completion. And I've got about 3 different little models in mind from some different drivers that I've been testing. I want to use something that's commercially available, just like you guys would just buy something off the shelf. And we're going to start with driver selection, measuring field small parameters, calculating a box for those drivers, calculating how far the drivers need to be spaced and things like that, and then actually building a pair of cabinets. We'll look at how to build the cabinets, how they go together, and easiest way to make them, easiest way to finish them, things like that. And then we're going to set that stuff up, do measuring and testing on it, and design a network for it. I'm going to let you in on the whole design process and let you then see how to assemble those networks and install them into the speaker, build out a completed pair, and then maybe hear the speakers. And we've got, like I said, there's 3 models in mind that I want to do that with, so that may take up a lot of episodes, but hopefully it'll really help you guys that are trying to learn to do this stuff for yourself if you watch me go through the whole process. And maybe there's parts of the process that we can help you with when you get to those points as well. Alright, so this week what I really want to go over and share with you are the speakers that I keep getting in every week. Every week we get speakers in. We do measuring and testing services, send them back out, and then sometimes we do upgrades and crossover design to work on stuff. These 2 models here are a couple that came in this week. This is a little Infinity model. It was real popular back in the day. I measured the stock version of this little speaker and then a version of it, as you can see, with a little AMT tweeter, and designed new networks for it and improved those quite a bit. The other one was the Klipsch speaker that you see next to me here, and there was so much gain, so much to benefit here in the upgrade that I want to just totally share this one with you guys and let you see kind of what I look at from beginning to end as I'm looking at these things and measuring and testing them and things like that. First of all, metal cone driver. There's definitely issues we've talked about with the metal cone drivers. The Klipsch horn loads the tweeter, which sometimes makes it a little forward or a little bright, and those are kind of some of the cons about it. The cabinet is really cheaply made. There is no damping, no bracing, very little damping in it, as you can hear. Very hollow. That's another issue with the speakers. And on the back you see the little clips that clip onto the binding posts that your signal's passing through. I'm sure these are, I don't know, made of tin. They look pretty, they coat them in gold, but not something you want in your signal path. Nice port that they put on the back of it. It's a flared port. It was tuned properly. There were good attributes about this little speaker, and it made me feel like, wow, there's a lot to gain here. So I'm going to have Ron pop up some of the measured responses on the speaker. I'm going to look at them here in paper so I can kind of follow along with you guys on. First one I'm going to have him put up is the measured frequency response of the speaker, and you'll notice it's a little ruffle around the bottom. It's got a little bit of a dipped area, and the tweeter end is up a little hot. You know, it's a little more aggressive on the big end, which corresponds with what you hear about the speaker. For most people, they say the speaker's a little forward, or it's a little bright, it's a little in your face. They've kind of voiced it that way. You know, it's just a little slightly hot across the top end. Next one I want you to look at is the crossover response. And as you see, the woofer has a little bit of a peaked area around 600 or 700 hertz and drops off pretty sharply, rolling into the tweeter's response. It also drops off pretty sharply. And there's a little bit of a dipped area between. And if you look at the way they're cascading into each other, you can see they're not really in phase very well at the crossover point. Not a perfect phase relationship there. So not the best as far as time arrival of one signal versus the other. So that was an issue. The other issue, as you start going up with the microphone, in other words, as you start moving up, or as your ear is being is higher than tweeter level, that dipped area at the crossover point gets deeper. You can see that in the vertical off-axis measurements. I have Ron pop that one up for you now. As you notice, as you go up, that hole gets a little deeper. That's showing that they're further and further out of phase as you go up. Now, as you go down, as you put the tweeter in line, or the microphone in line with the tweeter, and you start going down in height, they maintain a fairly consistent time arrival over a pretty wide range that way. So you're not seeing any more of a dip than it was on the on-axis. So I'll have Ron pop that one up there now. You can see it too. So let's imagine they're somewhat in phase about on-axis with the woofer and a little lower. And as you move up, you're looking at an area where they're a little more out of phase. As you look at the horizontal off-axis, as you go further and further off-axis, the response drops off rather smoothly, but it still reflects that hole in the response. So that part's still there. And if you look at the spectral decay on it is really clean. Just drops off really smoothly. We don't see a lot of stored energy, in spite of the fact that the woofer's pretty rough as far as stored energy goes. Next one I'm going to pop up there and show you is the measured frequency response of the woofer. The woofer's response has a huge peak around 5 or 6 kHz there. Lots of ringing there, lots of breakup, you know, something that's difficult to tame for sure. With the factory network, what they did was they just put a really steep second order filter on it, and you can see if you go back to the crossover response, where you see how sharp it dove. There was a peak there around 700 hertz or so that capacitor is causing. It's lifting it up there, but it's making it fall sharper at the upper range of the woofer. So that cap is it's helping it in one area. It's helping it way up top to get that ringing out of it, but it's also humping it up in that area around 700. So it's kind of good and it's bad. If that cap value gets smaller, what happens is that that hump starts to go away, but that peak at the bottom starts coming up, and it's pretty aggressive peak. That would be a lot of ringing. That would be really hard to listen to. The tweeter's response, so if you look just at the tweeter's response, that thing looked really smooth. Great response. It's lifted up a little bit as it goes into the lower part of its range. That's due to the way that it's loaded into that waveguide. All right, now let's look at what I managed to do with the thing. What I did with the woofer was, instead of going to a higher order network or a second order filter that's aggressive, I put a first order filter on it to smooth out the top part. or well, not really the top part, to smooth out the lower range so that it's a nice general roll off. So it rolled off really smooth but still had the aggressive peak. So what I did was I put a notch filter that was pretty aggressive, which in this case just involved 2 parts, that was right there within that narrow band where that peak was, and just completely knocked that peak right out of it. Just basically put a shunt to ground and just killed the peak. And that worked out really, really well. And then I put a first order filter on the tweeter, started it further back, let it roll off more gradually also. So the tweeter just wound up with a single cap. In this case we're going to use a Sonic cap, which is a really high quality cap, and 2 resistors. That's everything in the whole path for the whole tweeter. And as you look at the crossover response, Ron popped that up for you now, it looks great. I mean, it looks really great. It's smooth. There's no more dipped areas. It's flat all the way across, and you couldn't ask for it to be much smoother. We're talking plus or minus 3/4 of a dB to 1/2 a dB over a wide range. That's really impressive. As we look at the horizontal off axis, the horizontal off axis looks great. As good as any speaker that I've measured. It's just rolling off really smooth. As you get further and further off axis, the whole thing's perfectly level, and the top end starts to drop out of it. It looks fantastic. The vertical off axis looks better. It's more in phase at the tweeter, and it's in phase over a pretty good range. As you move really high off axis, it starts to drop out a little bit, maybe about 6 dB or so, and it's over a little bit of a wider range. But overall, the time arrival is much better now. Spectral decay again is really clean. No stored energy issues there at all. It drops off really fast across the board. The impedance is a little more balanced now than what it once was. So it looks great. And there's only 6 parts involved in the network, which I was surprised I could do what I did with only 6 parts. There was 5 parts on the original network. But this thing looks great, and it doesn't require a lot of parts. Now, the bonus of it not requiring a lot of parts is that there's not a lot of money there. We're not looking at much here in new networks. And in one of the next episodes that we're going to do, I'm going to try to do a follow-up on these. We're going to assemble the networks, and we're going to install them into the pair of speakers, and we're going to get a little bit of I'm going to do a little listening to them and give you a little better feedback over the whole upgrade. Now, the other parts of the upgrade that I'm going to recommend is I'm going to recommend that we knock out a pair of these binding posts and put a set of tube connectors in there. Now, tube connectors is a pretty significant upgrade, and I know that's just going to infuriate a lot of the flat earth naysayer type guys out there that are going to swear that different connectors can't possibly change the way it sounds or have any improvement over the way it sounds, but it does. It does, and it's very significant. So what I would do when I send these things out there, when I send out tube connectors, what I always recommend is wire your new network straight to the tube connectors, and then run a jumper from the tube connector over to the other set of binding posts or to your old binding posts. That way you can use either or. You can use the regular binding posts or the tube connectors, and you can go from one to the other and you can A/B compare. I've never ever, not once, had anybody tell me they couldn't hear a difference. In fact, I always get an email or a phone call back saying, I can't believe how much difference there is in the sound of these connectors. It's such a clarity across the board. It's like you lifted a blanket off the speaker and it's just clearer across the board. I hear it every single time. So trust me, it's different. So what's different about the tube connector? Well, the male end, the end that you put your speaker cable in, is hollow all the way to the tip. So your external speaker wire goes all the way to the tip. Then it plugs in to the tube connector, which is a solid copper tube that's hollow, and your internal speaker wire connects on this end. So what you wind up with is external speaker wire, internal speaker wire, tip to tip, surrounded by a copper tube. So it's low mass and puts a lot less in the signal path, and the quality of the sound is phenomenal compared to especially a cheap binding post like this. The cheaper the binding posts that you're replacing, the bigger the difference in sound. It's just tremendous how much better it sounds. I know it sounds a little bit like a commercial, But guys, it's worth it on an upgrade like this to throw in a set of tube connectors. It's just too much of an improvement. You can, if you want to do something with this, you just want to order the parts for these things and leave the same connectors on, because you just can't believe that a connector can make a difference. That's not a problem. We'll sell you everything you need to upgrade the parts, and you can leave the same connectors on there. But I'm telling you, it's a big improvement. So I recommend that for these. Besides, you're not spending much on the crossover parts to begin with. And then I'm going to recommend lining them with no-res. Now the no-res is going to attack that thing right there. It's going to knock that resonance out of there. It's going to tighten up the bass response. It's going to clean up the lower vocals. It's just going to have a much smoother and better sound, you know, through that whole lower range when you take away all the resonances of the panel. So I'm going to put a little package together for you guys. I know there's a lot of these out there, so if you're watching, you want to upgrade them. It's not going to be very much money. We're going to change the connectors on the back, put in a new crossover. We're going to point-to-point wire it with better quality wire, line it with some no-res, and I'm going to bet the improvement is very significant. And I know a lot of you guys out there think, man, that just can't be. I mean, all these engineers and these people that are working for this big company, surely what they did and engineered there has to be the way that it should be, the way they want it, the way it's supposed to be. That's the best it can get. No, not really. There's always room for improvement on these things. Do I think I can make it better? Yeah, I do. I mean, I do this every day. Stuff's just coming through here, measure, test, design new networks. And yeah, I can make it better. I've shown on the measurements how much smoother it measures, and with higher quality parts, I can guarantee that these higher quality parts, these air core inductor is going to sound better than this iron core inductor, and this larger gauge air core inductor is going to be better than this dental floss gauge inductor. This Sonicap is hugely better quality than the electrolytic cap that was on this thing and the little mylar cap that they put on it. The sandcast resistors are about, those are like the 12-cent variety, versus these are Mills resistors. So across the board, it's big. And this is on an inexpensive single layer circuit board, whereas we're going to recommend that you point-to-point wire this stuff, so none of that's in the signal path at all. No more of these things. So big improvement. I'll get some totals on this stuff and I'll make it available. We're going to follow up next week with assembly of this stuff and finish putting it together, and maybe I'll have a little more information about some of the stuff that's coming up in the future, so you guys can keep up with it. And again, if you have questions, drop them in the comments section. If you just want to gripe about wire and cable and connectors, I'm not really looking for a debate. If you want to try it and you want to listen, then great. You know, if you're interested in improvement and it doesn't cost very much money, and you want to see what that improvement can be, you know, we want to help you get to another level. So if you have questions, throw me a question. I'll try to follow up on all your questions. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate all the views, and we'll see you next week.